It's a rare occasion when Sir John Major, statesman known for his measured and cautious approach, steps forward to offer a sharp critique of contemporary global affairs. Yet his remarks on free speech, American isolation, and the rise of autocratic powers are not only timely but deeply concerning for those who value democratic principles. At the heart of Major's intervention is a clear warning: democracy is under threat. He paints a picture of a world in which the United States, once the steadfast guardian of liberal values, is retreating from the global stage, creating a power vacuum that authoritarian regimes like China and Russia are only too eager to fill. Major's criticism is pointed. Trump's policy of isolationism is not just a recalibration of foreign policy, but a reckless abdication of international leadership, leaving Europe and other democracies exposed to the rising tides of illiberalism. The warning is not abstract. Major highlights the growing influence of China, whose rise has been marked not by the promotion of democratic ideals, but by an increasingly aggressive push for control, whether through economic coercion, the suppression of dissent in Hong Kong, or its tightening grip on technological and digital freedom. If the United States under Trump or future administrations continues to disengage, then China's model of government, one in which state control trumps individual liberty, may become the dominant global force. Major is particularly scathing in his criticism of US Vice President J.D. Vance's speech at the Munich Security Conference, where Vance decried what he saw as Europe's erosion of free speech, claiming that it posed a greater threat than either Russia or China, and Major dismisses this assertion as hypocritical, arguing that it's absurd to lecture Europe on free speech while simultaneously engaging with, or in his words, cuddling, Vladimir Putin's regime, a regime where dissenters are not just censored, but often imprisoned, exiled, or mysteriously thrown from high windows in Moscow. This is where Major's voice is most significant. He rightly identifies the trend of growing nationalism, particularly from the intolerant right, as a major concern, and across the globe, the rise of populist leaders who undermine institutions, question judicial independence, and seek to discredit the media is becoming a defining feature of 21st century politics. Major's argument is that this trend is emboldened when the United States, the self-styled leader of the free world, ceases to defend these values, and his words should serve as a wake-up call, particularly for European leaders. If America is no longer willing to lead, then Europe must assume greater responsibility in defending our democracy, our free speech, our global security. And Major makes clear that the world is entering a period of transition, and whether that transition favours democracy or authoritarianism depends entirely on the resolve of Western nations to uphold the principles they claim to cherish. Furthermore, Major's intervention extends beyond mere warnings. He subtly calls for increased defence spending, a recognition that security and democratic values are inextricably linked. And while he sympathises with the financial constraints faced by governments, he insists that prioritising national defence and international alliances is non-negotiable in the face of rising threats. Perhaps the most striking aspect of Major's speech is his willingness to direct criticism to Trump's approach of foreign policy, something few former British prime ministers have done with such clarity, and he warns that any concessions Trump makes to Russia in a potential Ukraine peace deal will set a precedent, demonstrating that aggression and expansionism are rewarded rather than deterred. And if Russia can claim a victory in Ukraine, China and other autocratic regimes will take note, and democracy will suffer the consequence. Major's words, then, are not just an indictment of the present, but a call for action for the future. And he reminds us that democracy is not self-sustaining. It requires vigilance, commitment, and the willingness to stand up for the principles, even when it's politically inconvenient. The world, he suggests, is in the middle of a realignment, and whether that realignment is to the advantage of democracies or autocracies will depend on the choices made today. Major's intervention is a reminder that the battle for free speech, democracy, and international leadership is not a theoretical exercise. It's real, and it's a pressing struggle that will shape the world for generations. And if we fail to act, we may one day find that the freedoms we took for granted today have quietly slipped away.